What, only one piece? Nothing else, just leg?
Followed the manga, the Toei anime, or were familiar with Bandai's Yu-Gi-Oh card game, realized what was coming. The first alternate win condition based around Exodia. Exodia was a series of 5 cards originally used by Yugi at the climax of the Death Tea arc to instantly win his final match with Kaiba. If the player had all 5 in hand, they would instantly win the game. Exodia was not the first alternate win condition in trading card games in general. Magic the Gathering had already introduced multiple alternate win conditions in 1994, including using cards that discarded from the opponent's deck to deck them out, or building up 10 poison counters on their side of the field to instantly win the game. But Exodia was something introduced gradually through multiple media, and his first piece being included in Volume 3 was a source of hype for duelists. The translation of its first Japanese text is so funny.
Is that... Wait, what? I need to see this. Pot of Greed. Know your meme? No, I don't want to go to know your meme. Pot of Greed? It's not a meme. Shut up. Errata. Draw 2 cards from your deck. Draw 2 cards. Draw 2 cards. Period. Alright, what do we have here for OCG? Pull 2 cards from your deck. Destroy Pot of Greed after it is played. Draw 2 cards from your deck. Draw 2 cards from your deck. Draw 2 cards from deck. Draw 2 cards from the deck. How has Pot of Greed had more erratas than Firewall? How? This card has more erratas than Firewall Dragon. This went through a more rigorous balancing process than Firewall Dragon. Spunk, yes. But what does it do? It pulls 2 cards, not draw, to pull. Should we go to the let's Google Translate it.
Yeah.
What? This whole thing is...
Yeah.
Poland? Hello? Poland? How do I English? Wait, am I stupid?
Zifen no desuki ka ra ka duo tu mei haiku. Hai ta how de ki. Draw 2 cards from your deck. Destroy the greedy jar after pulling.
Destroy the greedy jar. I mean, it's not wrong. It's not wrong. It's Pot of Greed, right? So it's a greedy jar. Oh, that needs to be a new meme for progression series. Sorry, not progression series. Traditional. Okay, chat, from now on, with the feature matches today, if we see Pot of Greed, you know what we need to say. It's greedy jar.
Of Greed and Skell Angel to dig through the deck, the basic concept of a draw-focused Exodia deck that aimed to consistently get all 5 pieces in hand was already building up in players' minds. June 1999 brought with it the first limited edition set, a series of 3 packs named after Yugi, Kaiba, and Jonotsu from the manga. Every pack contained 3 cards, and players had to mail in a special stamp found in Weekly Shonen Jump magazine to receive the pack by mail order. These cards were...
Bruh. You had to get mail order booster packs. Man, the 90s was wild. Actually wild.
All originally secret cards in the first Duel Monsters Game Boy game, and most of them were unimportant to the OCG, but the Yugi pack in particular contained the Millennium Shield, a level 5 monster with 3000 defense and 0 attack. This was arguably the best wall monster in the game, as while it was even more vulnerable to stop defense and fissure than other walls, it could also stop an unequipped Blue Eyes White Dragon in its tracks. It was around this same time that stores began buying and selling singles for the Yu-Gi-Oh!
That's
OCG,
so bad.
And that cards first began to acquire serious collectible value. Early in June, the first Game Boy Color game, Duel Monsters 2 Dark Duel Stories, launched in Japan with 3 promos in each sealed box, randomly selected
so
from a pool
DDS2
of
is where
10.
the first promo
These
came from.
promos were much more significant than the limited edition pack cards, because they actually shifted both the expert rule and official rule metagame significantly through 3 specific cards: Chained Boomerang, Harpy's Feather Duster, and the Deadly Deck
Chained Boomerang. I'm sorry.
Chained Boomerang, Harpy's Feather Duster, and the Deadly Deck Destruction Virus.
Deadly
Chained
Deck
Boomerang,
Destruction.
called Kunai with Chain in the localized TCG, had 2 effects, and its controller could activate either or all of them when using it. The first effect turned an opponent's monster to defense position when it declared
How's
an
that a
attack,
boomerang?
while the second equipped the boomerang to its controller's monster and
an
gave
Australian
it 500
boomerang.
attack. This made it a better equipped magic than any of the previous ones, as it wasn't attribute specific, gave 100 more attack with no loss in defense, and
Dude, you
could
play
stop an
this with
opponent's
Holy
attack
Elf?
outright.
Let's go.
The only real trade-off was that it was a trap card, not a magic card, and so had to sit on the field for a turn before it could be used. But it was otherwise strictly better than all previous equipment. It was accompanied by actual equipped magic cards randomly inserted into the game boxes that granted 700 attack with no downside to a monster of a specific attribute or type. So not only were these promos good, they were actually power creeping cards that had been released just 2 months ago. Meanwhile, the deck destruction virus, called Crush Card Virus internationally, was a
Oh, so this is Crush Card. I thought this was Deck Dev. Huh. I guess it makes sense Crush Card was first, because that was the iconic one in the anime.
trap card that required its controller to sacrifice a dark attribute monster with 1,000 or less
isn't
attack
this
to
super
destroy
early?
all of the opponent's monsters with 1,500 or more attack on the field and in their hand for 3 turns. This means that the deck destruction virus allowed its controller to check the opponent's hand, every card they drew, and their face down cards. What's worse is that at the time, Deck Destruction Virus's original print tributed itself along with the Dark Monster, and its effect floated over the next 3 turns even though it wasn't physically on the board, so it couldn't be disabled with Negate Trap. This was...
Oh my god, that's like so dumb. Like the way the rules worked. So they had to specifically write on the card text that it removed itself from the field. Otherwise, it would work like Swords of Revealing Light, where it would sit there face up. But they made it even more broken by tributing itself away so that you couldn't use Remove Trap or Trap Master.
actually a downgrade from its manga incarnation, which stayed in effect permanently. The only thing holding it back...
Wait, manga Crush Card's permanent?
aside from being a random pack-in with a video game purchase, was that there were very few dark monsters with 1,000 or less attack when it was printed, with the
Sagi!
first really good ones, Critter and Karibo, not being printed until
Critter? What? Critter? They called this guy Critter?
November 99 and January 2000. Harpy's Feather Duster was actually the worst of the new cards, in part because unlike the virus, it hadn't changed at all.
Dude, imagine having a set and a format where Harpy's Feather Duster is the worst card. Like, oh, out of all of these things, this is the fucking shit one.
Its manga effect was kept word for word. Destroy all of the opponent's magic and trap cards.
Sangan translates into chat. Holy shit. Can you guys please stop with these fucking water is wet statements are starting to trigger me. Like, this is like the 4th person to this. Like, yes, that's the OCG translate. I know how words work. Yes, it's just funny. I'm allowed to laugh at it, okay? It's, when you hear this for the first time, it creates a sense of wonderment and excitement and surprise in my brain, and it excludes it, and it manifests itself as humor, as ho-ho, right? That it's... I know! It's the OCG name. Fuck.
If it had been reduced to destroying a single magic or trap card, it might have been balanced. But as printed, it was the magic trap equivalent of Thunderbolt, which Konami had already limited to 1 per deck. In practical terms, it was a counter to Pitfall, Chained Boomerang, Deck Destruction Virus, and all equipped magic.
I'm starting to lose track of which card is which, dude. Boomerang, Thunderbolt, fucking Deck Dev, even though it's Crush Card.
but it was only going to get stronger as the game got more magic and trap cards, and Konami had to know exactly what they were printing here. More than the brain-dead gameplay of the first 3 months or the one-deck format.
Hey, it wasn't brain-dead.
This was probably the strongest indication that players should have gotten out of the game while the getting was good. Konami
Rogue
created
Elf
cards
Equip
of this
is
power
good
scale,
gameplay.
packed them in randomly in a 4,800 yen video game to push sales, and likely planned to throw these cards on the list once they had made their money, just as they had with Thunderbolt. And that's exactly what they did, making it their first ever semi-limited card in their second revision to the ban list in February 2000, restricting players to
That's
using
really shitty
only
when you
2
hear it for
copies
the
of
first time, isn't it?
Subsequent revisions would hit Feather Duster down to 1 copy.
Like, you'd think, like, people would come away from that and realize, like, how shitty of a thing that is to do, right? You make these extremely rare cards that are only obtainable out of a game physical box for a portable games console that costs 48,000 yen. So you have to go out and collect those cards, who are unlimited to 3 on release if you want to be competitive. You take those cards, and then you play them in your deck. And then once the units of the Game Boy game had sold out everywhere and you had made your money, you then put them on a list for the ban list to actually balance your game so it isn't a complete shit show with triple crush card running around. And then you just limit them, and then you repeat the process again every single set in every ban list. You just print these broken cards and monsters to sell, and then you just limit them and ban them. And then you do it again with the next set. Damn, that's crazy. I feel like that marketing strategy might currently be in place for how many years now, dude? Still better than set rotation. Copium.
Before banning it
Copium.
outright as the first ever forbidden card. As a result of the power of these promos, this was when players first started experiencing exorbitant prices for single cards. One duelist recalled being shocked to see a card selling for over 2,000 yen in 1999. Although that's laughably low for a rare Yu-Gi-Oh card today, back then this was a big deal and significantly more than you would see a Pokemon or Moncole single.
Well, how much is that? Yen to pounds. 2,000 yen? 13 pounds. Measured for inflation, that's probably like 20, 25, maybe 30 back then. I mean, you're looking at like 25, 30 in today's money. That's not that expensive, but you know. Like, this is the first time people are witnessing it, so it makes sense that it's crazy, right?
Going for. Booster 3.
Little did they know that if they had first edition copies of those, they could sell them for thousands 10 years later.
Hit card-ass machines on July 17th, and while primarily remembered in Japan for its trap cards, it did introduce one somewhat important monster. The Hourglass of Courage, a 4-star monster that started with half its attack and defense when first summoned, but then on the end phase of its controller's next turn instead doubled the base values to 2,200 and 2,400. This was a hard card to keep alive, but players would play it with Swords of Revealing Light to get a 4-star monster exceeding the power of Curse of Dragon and an equipped Holy Doll. Aside from this, the monsters in the set continued the trend of standardizing 1,600 attack as the maximum for 4-star vanillas. What Japanese duelists really remembered the set for were 3 trap cards. Reinforcements, a poor man's version of Chained Boomerang.
This came out years later in TCG.
Castle Walls, which did the same thing but for defense, and the permanent trap card Chi no Daisho, Payment in Blood, what international players
Ultimate
know
Offering.
as Ultimate Offering.
Oh!
Chi no Daisho allowed players to pay 500 life points to get an additional.
Dude, look at that fucking OCG artwork. Like, look at that OCG artwork. I mean, to be fair, the TCG artwork is like kind of pretty violent as well. I think that's supposed to be his blood like bursting out of his body and forming itself as like a creature, which is still pretty violent for TCG. But then the OCG one is like payment and blood. You know? That's crazy.
Normal summon on either player's turn.
I thought it was ketchup
About
as a
10
kid.
videos ago, I dropped a popular aphorism used in Magic the Gathering.
What kind of parents did you have who convinced you that this was ketchup?
The only point that matters is your last one. This is true of all abstract life systems. Whether you have 8,000 life points or 1, you are in no danger if the opponent cannot actually get damage through. Chi no Daisho was incredibly easy to exploit. You could set it on your first turn, and provided it did not get hit with Harpy's Feather Duster, on your second turn, activate it, pay 1,000 life points to summon 2 4-star or less monsters, then tribute them for your regular normal summon to instantly have a Blue Eyes on the field. That's taking 4 cards out of your hand to do that, but it didn't matter because you had Pot of Greed anyway. And because Chi no Daisho was a permanent trap, it stayed on the field indefinitely, meaning you could keep using it every turn as much as you wanted so long as you could pay the price. Additionally, because the card had somewhat ambiguous wording in its first print, it also caused misunderstandings at the local level, where players thought they could summon 5-star or greater monsters, and in many cases they were even allowed to do so because shop tournament organizers didn't know any better. Volume 4 launched on July 22nd,
Rulings?
introducing 50 new cards to the
Greedy
OCG,
jar
and
rulings?
only 3 of them mattered. The Summoned Demon, Mask of Darkness, and Saint Magician. The Summoned Demon mattered because it was a single tribute monster with 2,500 attack, making it as strong as the 2 tribute Black Magician and only surpassed by the Blue Eyes White Dragon. It could match these cards point for point with Chained Boomerang or Reinforcements, but it didn't necessarily need to, because having such a strong single tribute monster dramatically sped up the game. It replaced Curse of Dragon as the strongest single tribute monster, creeping the power scale from 2,000 to 2,500, and breaking through 2,000 defense walls in a way that an unequipped Curse of Dragon could not. Because it effectively took the same number of cards from your hand to get a demon out compared to equipping a Holy Doll, and for 500 more points, this was the end of Light and Earth attribute beatdown. These decks gradually gave way to a new form of good stuff.
But I love the Earth Light beatdown format.
Demon Beat was in part responsible for stop defense being phased out of competitive play, as wall monsters could now be overcome just by getting out a summoned demon, and demon was incredibly easy to re-summon if destroyed by a flip effect thanks to Chi no Daisho. Mask of Darkness and Saint Magician were counterpart flip effect monsters. When Darkness was flip summoned, it added a trap card from your graveyard to your hand, while when Magician was flip summoned, it bounced a magic card from grave to hand. These cards were incredible because they negated the loss in card advantage from using a trap or magic, allowing a player to reuse Pot of Greed, Swords of Revealing Light, Monster Reborn, Reinforcements, and just about anything else you could come up with. Mask of Darkness was the less useful of the two, due to Pitfall being limited, and there being few good trap cards in general,
Pitfall?
But it did have one advantage. Because it had less than 1,000 attack, after you were done flip summoning it for the effect, it could be tributed for the deadly deck destruction virus and wipe out the opponent's board and hand. This set also included the right leg of the Forbidden One, while the right and left arms of the Forbidden One were packaged with the 2 Dark Duel Stories guidebooks, meaning there were now 4 pieces of Exodia available.
Still no head though. Still no head. They put them in different packs. So these 2 are from the rulebook. This is from this volume, and then the head is like still not released. That's so funny.
Everything Yu-Gi-Oh! Had been building toward for the past year came to a head on August 26th, when the second national tournament was held at the Tokyo Dome. The tournament was broken up into 2 sections, one being the national championship for the Game Boy Color game, Duel Monsters 2 Dark Duel Stories, and the other being the first OCG champion.
Dude, look at that. Look at how many people are there. It's just bodies.
For the physical card game. Nationals was designed to imitate the structure of the manga's Duelist Kingdom arc. Each participant was given 2 star chips, which they wagered in the event on duels, aiming to collect enough chips within the time limit to make it to the next round. To promote the first large-scale competitive event to use the expert rules, Konami advertised an event-exclusive booster pack sold only at the tournament, Premium Pack 1. Premium Pack 1 only had 10 cards in its set list, but the only one that mattered was Exodia the Forbidden One, the 5th piece of Exodia necessary to instantly win the game. Konami claimed the pack would only be sold at the event, and if you missed your chance to buy packs there, you wouldn't get the chance again. Ever. Over 65,000 people attended, with 10,000 of them being unable to enter the building due to the dome reaching capacity.
65,000? Those aren't entrants. Those are just people attending the event. But still, I hope that's not 65,000 entrants. What the fuck? 65,000 people. That's like just like a national football game. Like, to play Yu-Gi-Oh!
This was not conceivable. The Tokyo Dome had been at capacity for Michael Jackson and Madonna. It had never been filled completely by
But what about Greedy
trading
Jar?
card game. The vast majority of people there were not actually present for the tournament, but had come to buy packs. Collectors,
Fucking scalpers? What the hell? Literal scalpers.
parents, and children chasing after a copy of Exodia for themselves or their child. Inside the dome itself, there was only a single vendor set up to sell the premium pack, and tens
One vendor for 65,000 people. One vendor. One vendor.
of thousands of people were lined up to buy from this single station. Initially, Konami postponed sales of the packs for 2 hours to try and control the situation, but shortly after they began selling the packs, they abruptly canceled sales of Premium Pack 1 entirely and closed the vendor station. This was disastrous. Tens of thousands of people had been standing in line for hours in 90-degree weather to buy a product that would never be on sale again. They finally started seeing the people at the front of the line getting to buy and were suddenly told that none of them were getting any. That day, 80 riot police were dispatched to the Tokyo Dome. The 50,000 some people that had made it into the dome had started a protest against Konami, while the 10,000 outside
Fucking protests! Dude, this is next level. This is beyond anything I've heard for Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, this is unreal. How have I never heard this before?
had blocked off the gates and prevented anyone from entering or leaving in the commotion. The resulting mob became violent, and Konami canceled the tournament midway through during the second round of the preliminaries. 2 people were hospitalized, and dozens more treated for minor injuries, while tournament players were left waiting for 4 hours before finally getting confirmation that the tournament finals would not continue. The Tokyo Dome riot made national news the next day, reported in newspapers like the Asahi Shimbun and on TV news networks like NHK, even finding its way into international news. Konami subsequently issued a public apology and set up a system for tournament attendees to purchase their premium packs by mail order, but this was about more than just packs.
A riot happened because of an Exodia head, and a 65,000 capacity like stadium had to be enforced by riot police with fucking suited up like gear, and then the tournament was cancelled at round 2, and they just cancelled the tournament. I wonder how many people actually entered like the tournament itself to like compete. Like probably like thousands, right? Surely.
The riot was not as big an issue, nor on the same scale as the Pokemon seizures of 2 years earlier, and yet it was intimately more disturbing. The Pokemon shock was caused by
There was a Pokemon riot as well? Dude, that's something for another video I need to watch sometime.
ignorance, accidentally sending over 600 people to the hospital. The Dome riot was the result of Konami's game being so in demand that it convinced human beings to
Wait, I need to hear that part again.
And yet it was but this was about more than just packs. The riot was not as big an issue, nor on the same scale as the Pokemon seizures of 2 years earlier, and yet it was intimately more disturbing. The Pokemon shock was caused by ignorance, accidentally sending over 600 people to the hospital. The Dome riot was the result.
What was the Pokemon thing? Did they play like some kind of screen or some shit that had like flashing lights that caused fits or something? An episode of the anime? The Porygon episode? Ah, okay. Right. I see.
Result of Konami's game being so in demand that it convinced human beings to intentionally hurt each other over not being able to consume a product. In that way, the 2 people hospitalized by the Tokyo Dome riot represented something far worse than the 600 seizure victims. Actual human malice. Who assaults someone over a single pack of cards?
Gotta get that head though, bro. Gotta pull the Exodia, bro.
A lot of players quit in response to the incident, but this was only the beginning. The riot became the first in a long line of Yu-Gi-Oh! Incidents that continue up to the present day. In May 2001, the family of a Tokyo boy filed an $80,000 lawsuit against another family whose son robbed him of over 400 cards. In February 2012, 2 California teenagers were arrested for robbing another boy at gunpoint for $4,800 worth of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards after having...
I feel like I heard about this. Teens arrested for stealing $5,000 worth of cards at gunpoint.
having previously scoped him out at a tournament and built a friendship with him. In November 2017,
wait, whoa, that's next. That's like anime plotline.
of over 400 cards. In February 2012, 2 California teenagers were arrested for robbing another boy at gunpoint for $4,800 worth of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards after having previously scoped him out at a tournament and built a friendship with him.
That is like an actual anime plotline. That's crazy. No, yeah, that's sociopathic. That's insane. That's like actual, like clinically, like mentally insane. Like you scope out a target, build a fake friendship so they trust you, so that you can mug them at gunpoint and steal their Yu-Gi-Oh! Collection. This was 2012. So this was like what, Teledad or something? Is that what like the money cards are? Is that, like, dude, that's crazy. That's like, whoa.
In November 2017, 3 Illinois men robbed a 17-year-old at gunpoint for 100 Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards.
I remember this one specifically because I actually was playing the game at this time. So this did the rounds on the news and I heard about this.
Today, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is infamous for the way its players behave.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Some of the first tournament advice
Hey, fuck you! Hey!
I ever received was to watch my stuff around Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, and that if you see somebody at a tournament selling a whole deck weirdly low, it's definitely stolen. But even in 1999, when the Japanese singles market was in a fledgling state and people were amazed,
It's not stolen. For you, brother, Habibi, I give you good deal. Best deal, my friend, my brother, for you. Habibi, it's a good deal, brother. It's for you, brother. It's a good deal. I give you good deal. It's not stolen.
to see cards go for 2,000 yen, Yu-Gi-Oh! Could start a riot. Today, more and more stores and even convention centers are banning the game outright, refusing to carry it or host events because of the harm it's done to their local communities and public image, while a lot more
Yu-Gi-Oh! Banned from LGS? A game con founded by my LGS. Inspired to make a Yu-Gi-Oh! Cube, worked on it for a few hours. Yu-Gi-Oh! Banned at D20 Games. Man, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are scumbags, huh? 10th anniversary event starts August 6th. What is this place? Magic, Pokemon, D&D, board games. No Yu-Gi-Oh! Here! Wow. Wait, this is just a store, right? This isn't like a big convention, is it? This part is very over-exaggerated. I mean...
or only tolerate it for the blood money. A lot of players saw the writing on the wall in 1999 and got out there. Those that were undeterred by the violence went back to their deck building. With Premium Pack 1 more or less in players' hands, for the first time ever, Exodia decks were possible. At this point, players could run 3 copies each of an Exodia piece, though acquiring 3 was difficult because of 2 of them being Game Guide promos and the head exclusive to the Premium Pack. But hey, if you couldn't defraud Konami for extra Premium Packs, you could always rob somebody for them. On the same day as the failed...
This guy hates Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. It's pretty convincing. He's not really trying to hide it anymore. Like, this guy just hates Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. Something must have happened to him.
National Championship, Konami sent out stocks of Booster 4 cards for stores to stock their card-ass vending machines with, bringing the game's total card count to 423. Booster 4 brought with it massive power creep. The maximum attack for 4-star vanillas jumped from 1600 to 1900, and the entire pool of 4-star monsters was effectively replaced in this pack by the triple combination of Gemini Elf, Mecha Hunter, and La Jin, the mystical genie of the lamp. This made players nervous, as it seemed like with these rapid power increases, they might soon have 4-star monsters with more attack than a Blue Eyes. And while Konami seemed dead set on making Holy Doll blush, they also sought to outdo Pot of Greed at the same time. Booster 4's magic cards included Graceful Charity, a card just recently featured in the manga's Battle City arc, which allowed its player to draw 3 cards and then discard 2. In terms of card advantage, this was a net neutral exchange, giving up itself and 2 other cards to draw 3, but it allowed a player to go deeper in the deck by filtering. Rather than creep out Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity coexisted with it and complemented it, and players ran both cards in dedicated Exodia decks to draw all 5 pieces as quickly as possible and instantly win. Not coincidentally, the recent chapters of the manga focused on Yugi dueling a rare hunter playing an Exodia deck that used exactly these cards to draw its way to victory. Takahashi was coordinating with Konami to ensure these chapters would serialize just as players got access to the 5 Exodia pieces and the new draw support. This kind of marketing synergy was basically unheard of in the TCG world, and it worked, although the resulting deck was really boring. Exodia Draw was like the peak of Yu-Gi-Oh's non-interactive game design, playing solitaire and barely paying any attention to the opponent's
That's my favorite
field.
clip ever.
Players used Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity, Flip Summons and Walls to stall the opponent, and Saint Magician to
He's not playing the original audio. This clip is amazing.
later reuse their Graceful Charities until they could get all 5 pieces in hand. Because of its low availability, Exodia was thankfully not the only deck in the format. Players also experimented with using Graceful Charity to purposefully discard high-level monsters like the Blue Eyes White Dragon and then revive them with Monster Reborn. The powerful draw effects of this format and the ability to reuse them with Saint Magician combined with the small deck size deeply destabilized a game that was already crumbling under the weight of Ultimate Offering and Deck Destruction virus.
Yeah, that was Link
The
Evolution.
next month brought Volume 5 to store shelves, which introduced the magic card Change of Heart. Change of Heart gave control of one of the opponent's monsters to its
Have you noticed
caster
how
until
good
the
all
end
of
the
these
turn.
spell cards are?
On paper, losing a card to temporarily be able to attack with the opponent's monster wasn't particularly game-breaking, but the monster Change of Heart took control of could also be sacrificed for a tribute summon, making Change of Heart into a simultaneous source of field and tempo control. By tributing your opponent's monster for your own summoned demon, you took a card from them while not having to sacrifice your own. Normally, you would need to use a magic or trap card to destroy an opponent's monster and then provide your own monster for tribute on top of that, but Change of Heart reduced the number of cards you would need to expend to complete those actions. Not only
So do you know what like what do you think the worst part of playing early Yu-Gi-Oh is? Because we complain about DM staples in something like the Progression series, right? Imagine having to play through this era where the DM staples are unlimited at 3 copies. So you're not just dealing with like Pot, Greedy Jar, and Graceful, and Reborn, and Change of Heart. They're at 3 copies. Provided that you don't get shot, I guess, when you're at a tournament.
this, but because Change of Heart preserved the monster's battle position when moving it to your side of the board, you could use it to steal face-down flip effect monsters and then flip summon them yourself to get their effects. Adding Change of Heart back to hand from the graveyard with Saint Magician in the same turn that you used it, or destroying an opponent's monster with Maneater Bug before tributing it to get rid of 2 monsters in 1 turn, and so on. Like Pot
My audio.
of Greed and Graceful Charity, Change of Heart made every deck that had it better, and every deck that didn't was worse off for not having it. The same set introduced another powerful magic card, Tribute to the Doomed. This was a normal magic that allowed its controller to discard a card to destroy any monster on the field, a 2-for-1 exchange that could easily remove anything from a Blue Eyes down to flip effect monsters, conveniently without activating their flip effects. While the discard cost was significant even with Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity in the format, Tribute to the Doomed immediately became a staple card used to neutralize the opponent's board more easily than Fisher or the limited cards could. The introduction of Change of Heart and Tribute to the Doomed is sometimes thought of in the Japanese fandom as the point when Yu-Gi-Oh! Really opened up as a game, as there were now a variety of possible monsters a set card could represent, and the choice of when to use Change of Heart, Tribute, or neither was a serious component in player skill. At the same time, there was a lot of stupid stuff in the format, like Deck Destruction Virus, Exodia, and Harpy's Feather Duster, and the only thing really stopping it from becoming completely degenerate was the limited resources younger players tended to have. Despite being nominally darker, Yu-Gi-Oh! Did not have the same general audience's multi-demographic appeal as Pokemon. Parents, older teens, and young adults rarely played Yu-Gi-Oh! In this period, and by 2001 Konami estimated that about 9/10 of the player base was young boys. Older players tended to gravitate towards Moncole, Magic, and the recently released Aquarian Age, and in part because of this, the singles market for Yu-Gi-Oh! Wasn't growing as rapidly. With the game being driven largely by elementary and middle school students, full-on Exodia decks that exploited the card for all it was worth were rare.
You know, you can imagine how sad you must have felt, like, if, like, the majority of the people playing your game are just, like, actual children. Like, straight up, like, children, right? But then, like, there's just, like, this one local store that just has this, like, 40-year-old man. And he just rocks up with his, like, you know, real-life job and employment that he, like, actually makes real money from. And then he uses that money and he just purchases, like, 3 head, three of each limb, 3 greedy jar, 3 graceful, you know? And he's just sitting there like... Yep, I'm just playing Yu-Gi-Oh! With the boys.
Booster 5 arrived on October 17th and introduced the first mill cards to Yu-Gi-Oh! Milling, named after the old magic card Millstone, refers to exploiting a common rule in most TCGs. You lose if you run out of cards in your deck. Needleworm was Yu-Gi-Oh!'s first mill card, discarding 5 cards from the top of the opponent's deck when it was flipped face up. With Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity being ubiquitous at this time, Needleworm was a very dangerous card to attack into during the endgame, and it was backed up by a more indirect mill from the same set, Metamorpot, known as Morphing Jar internationally. Metamorpot's effect forced both players to discard their hands and draw 5 cards, similar to Wheel of Fortune in Magic the Gathering, and while it wasn't directly sending cards in deck to the grave, it was still contributing to the end goal of decking the opponent out. However, while Mill could be backed up by deck destruction virus, it wasn't very common and was being held back by some of the early rulings. In particular, the OCG at this time made the player with more life points the winner when either player ran out of cards. Later on, Yu-Gi-Oh! Would switch to giving an automatic loss to any player that had to draw a card and had no cards left in deck to draw, which would make Mill much more viable as a strategy. Metamorpot also had a place in disrupting Exodia decks, and as a
Chat, you guys are like question marking as if that's like a stupid rule. Like that's like completely reasonable, you know? If the rule was that if from the very beginning of the game that whoever decked out, the loser was the guy with the lower life points, we would be sitting here accepting that rule and be thinking none the wiser of it, right? It doesn't sound like a dumb rule. And then in an alternate universe, we would watch this video and he would say, whoever decked out first, and if they were unable to draw any cards, would instantly lose the duel. And then we would be spamming question mark at that. It's arbitrary. There's really no, like, you can't really say one is better than the other, right? I mean, they both are just rules that exist, and either or could probably be, like, reasonable. Spunk, yes.
Simple hand replenishment for players low on cards. Timing a voluntary flip of Metamorpot to a point in the game where you had very few cards in hand and the opponent had a lot would cement an advantageous position for you by both closing the gap between players and decreasing the opponent's card advantage. The set also introduced a number of trap-focused cards, chief among them Royal Decree, which negated the effects of all trap cards except itself. Despite how powerful this effect was, Royal Decree did not see heavy play at launch because there were very few good trap cards. The OCG at this time was a Monsters and Magic game with only Deck Destruction Virus, Ultimate Offering, and Pincer Attack for standout traps. So Booster 5's main
fucking 2-pronged attack was still played? That card sucks.
Contribution at the time was Metamorpot, while the rest of the set's contents would need time to come into its own. Volume 6 debuted on November 18th, introducing a number of counter-trap cards to the game, chief among them Kami no Senkoku, God's Judgment, localized as Solemn Judgment internationally. This card could be activated in response to the activation of a magic card, trap card, or the summoning of a monster. In exchange for half the caster's life points, the effect Judgment countered would be negated, and both that card and God's Judgment would be destroyed. The initial reception to Judgment was lukewarm, but over time it became one of the more prolific countercards in the game, as players became keenly aware of just how little life points mattered. This set also introduced 2 of Yu-Gi-Oh's most infamous search cards, Critter, renamed Sangan in the international market, and Witch of the Black Forest. The effects of these monsters have been modified repeatedly since their debut, and may have even changed since this video was recorded, but at the time, Critter's effect added a monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand when it was sent to the graveyard, while Witch of the Black Forest added a monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. In Magic the Gathering terms, they were tutor cards akin to Demonic Tutor, but specifically searched for lower strength monsters, in theory those with effects. At their debut, Critter and Witch didn't specify the way they were sent to the graveyard, so while the normal way to use them would be to have them get destroyed by battle, it was also possible to discard them for Graceful Charity to
That's absolutely unreal. Graceful Charity, draw, Sangan Witch, discard Sangan Witch, search.
resolve their effects. Graceful Charity was normally a net neutral exchange, sending itself and 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard to draw 3 more. But for every Critter or Witch you discarded, you would get an
Chaotic
additional
2,
card
you've
in
said
hand,
thighs
allowing
better
you to
than
become a
Booba
net
4
positive
times in
exchange,
30 seconds.
a +2 at max.
It's getting really weird,
Critter
champ. I'm
and Witch's
timing you
effects
out.
could also be used if they were destroyed by a card effect like God's Judgment or Maneater Bug, making the opponent's use of those cards a waste of resources. The range of targets they could search was also incredible, with Witch of the Black Forest in particular being able to tutor Summon a Demon and Gemini Elf freely, and both cards being capable of searching out Exodia pieces. And since Critter was a Dark Attribute monster, it could also be used as the sacrifice for Deck Destruction Virus, while Witch could search for Critter or another monster that met the virus's criteria. Critter could even be used to tutor Mask of Darkness after Deck Destruction's activation, in order to activate the virus a second time on a subsequent turn. All of these properties made them instant staples in every deck, as they improved both good stuff and Exodia decks at no real downside. With all of these search and draw effects available, the consistency of Exodia skyrocketed. At the time, there were essentially only 3 matchups in the game: Good Stuff versus Good Stuff, Exodia versus Exodia, and Good Stuff versus Exodia. The Good Stuff versus Exodia match was highly asymmetric because of the Exodia deck having a much faster kill condition, combined with the ability to slow the opponent down through Swords of Revealing Light.
I mean, you have a format with like triple 2000 defense walls, swords, like...
points, while Exodia could win on the first turn of the game thanks to its draw and search support. The best Good Stuff decks could do to counter Exodia was run Metamorpot and Needleworm to try to send Exodia pieces to the grave, but this wasn't consistent because accidentally discarding a Critter or Witch of the Black Forest would allow the opponent to tutor more pieces out of the deck, and these effects...
This is so fucked. Like, it's actually crazy to think like this was dog shit in TCG, but it's actually like almost tier 0 in OCG. Like this like stupid like Exodia deck that triggers Sangan and Witch from the hand. Like, that's absurd. Like, it's so broken. How many pieces do you think they played? I'm trying to think in my head, like, what the optimal ratio is, right? I mean, I assume it's probably just 2 of each, right? There's no way you play 3 of each piece. Like, that's a lot. That's 15 Garnet in your deck, dude. Wait, 3 times 5 is 15. Yeah, 15. 15 just shit cards? Like, I feel like 2 is what you play. Did he say 3? 2 to 3? Yeah, but you wouldn't like mix and match them, right? You would either do all of them were 2 ofs, or all of them are 3 ofs, right? I don't think there's like, oh, I'm gonna play 2 legs, 3 head, and like 2 left arm, and then 3 right arm. Like, you wouldn't mix and match. 1, 3 of head. How does that make any sense? Why would you mix and match them? There isn't any cards that benefit vanillas. Like, maybe if there was you know, what's that card that adds vanillas from your hand, from your grave or something? Like, maybe like that would work because you could play like more heads and less limbs because you could just add them. Yeah, like backup. Like that doesn't exist, right? So surely you just go 2, 2, 2, 2, or 3 of everything, right? I feel like you don't like play 1 because you lose your win condition if they hit with Morphing Jar or Needleworm. But I don't know.
Be negated with God's Judgment, which started growing in popularity with Exodia decks in response to these counters. December 1st brought with it Booster 6, the final expansion of the 20th century. This set featured support for fusion monsters, but they remained underplayed even after it released. See, fusion monsters required the player to use the magic card Fusion, called Polymerization internationally, to tribute 2 monsters whose names were listed in the fusion materials of a fusion monster in their extra deck, summoning...
Look at by the way, Polymerization's card text is like some of the funniest stuff you'll ever read. Like the erratas, like fuse 2 or more fusion material monsters to form a new fusion monster. Look at this.
That monster into the field from an area that was outside normal gameplay. But that was a problem because it required players to have 3 specific cards in hand. Booster 6 tried to ease the requirements with Goddess with the Third Eye, which could substitute itself for any 1 fusion material monster. You still had to have at least 1 of the other materials and a copy of Fusion in hand though, while the fusion monsters themselves weren't all that much stronger than regular ones. Third Eye's effect was widely misinterpreted during Yu-Gi-Oh's first Japanese block because of an at-the-time ambiguous wording, with players mistakenly assuming they could use 2 copies of them to substitute for both fusion materials, and this wasn't clarified until the second block began in mid-2000.
Oh yeah, you could just fuse both of these together and just make like Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. Well, no, that needs 3 materials. You could fuse 2 of these together and make a fucking, what's it called? Meteor Black Dragon. What's the OCG? Like, I don't even know what the name is. Like, fucking Joey Demon Dragon.
To try and ease the requirements further, Fusion was made searchable through the magic card Fusion Sage, which functionally meant it counted as another copy of Fusion, since as soon as you drew it, you could have Fusion in your hand. Fusion was also made recyclable through the effect monster Monster Eye, which allowed its controller to pay 1,000 life points to bounce a copy of Fusion from graveyard to hand. Monster Eye was searchable by both Critter and Witch of the Black Forest, and so this created a basic skeleton for a fusion-centric deck, in the same way Metamorpot and Needleworm had made a skeleton for mill decks. But all of these cards paled in comparison to Booster 6's marquee card, Devil Franken, localized as Cyberstein in the English game. Devil Franken's effect allowed its controller to pay 5,000 life points to special summon a fusion monster from the fusion deck. This completely bypassed the need for fusion support, at the exchange of having a low-power monster in attack position with only 3,000 or less life remaining. The ideal target for this was Black Demon's Dragon with 3,200 attack, introduced all the way back in Volume 5, but rarely played until this set. Because of the ease with which Franken could be searched and used, it didn't actually play into a bigger fusion strategy. Instead, Franken was absorbed directly into Demon Beat Good Stuff decks as a way of instantly bringing out high-attack fusion monsters. Over time, Devil Franken
sounds like a really
much more
deck.
Destabilizing to the game as a
Chat,
whole.
we should have like
the ease
a
of use combined with
here's the thing, early TCG formats are fucking boring, right? But if we do like an early OCG tournament, that could be kind of fun, right? Like just play like fusion decks, and maybe we just ban Exodia because that sounds like terrible. But this sounds like a base deck.
The general worthlessness of life as a resource made it a key component of one-hit and one-turn kill decks, eventually resulting in it earning a place on Konami's ban list. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was in pretty dire straits at this point, and it wasn't alone. Think back to the Pokemon videos. In November 1999, where is the Pokemon metagame? Between Challenge from Darkness and the first Neo expansion, with Vending Machine Haunter and... Actually, let's not think about that. The point is, this was a low point for TCGs in general. And it was in this period that the Digimon Hyper Coliseum trading card game first began to gain traction in Japan, in part because the other games on the market were turning players away with formats where they couldn't really do anything. Konami was well aware of what they were doing to their own game's accessibility, and so ended the OCG's first year on the market with the EX Starter Box, a new set of starter decks intended as an introductory point for new players. Rather than a reprint of the original starter box, this set consisted of reprints of key staples: Change of Heart, Black Hole, Lejin, Maneater Bug, Monster Reborn, Holy Doll, Summon a Demon, Ultimate Offering, and others.
This is just Japanese like Duel Devastator
to get in, but it also introduced several new cards.
The Japanese
First
Megaton
up was a trap card, Waboku no Shisa, the Messengers of Peace,
Waboku!
Named internationally as Waboku. This trap card nullified its player's battle damage for the turn, and prevented allied monsters from being destroyed by battle. While not as long-term as Swords of Revealing Light, Waboku became an instant staple in Exodia decks as another tool for prolonging the game while trying to set up the instant win condition. The EX Starter Box also introduced the game's first Infinite Loop, available through the magic card Last Will. Last Will's first Japanese print read, "This turn, instead of sending a monster to the graveyard, you can place a monster with 1,500 or less attack from your deck onto the field." This description rather infamously made no sense to Japanese players, and it had very unconventional wording, not using the phrase summon and, if applied literally, stopping any of your monsters destroyed by battle or card effects from going to the graveyard. The actual effect, as ruled at the time, was that during the turn you activated Last Will, every time your monster was sent to the graveyard, you could special summon another one from your deck. There was no...
Alright, chat. Let's break it down. Last Will errata. Japanese. Where's the Japanese text? Yo! Why is there no Japanese text here? Do I need to go to Yugipedia? He's explaining it? Yes, but I want to read it. LaPrince, you've said 2 dumb fuck things today. What's going on here? Are you okay? Last will. Okay, it's not in the Yugipedia wiki. Okay, yes. Wrong wiki. Oh. Can you read Japanese? I'm trying, dude. Alright, errata. Why is there no Japanese text? I don't... Why? Like, why? How? Hello? How was that dumb? Because I don't want him to explain it. I want to read the card for myself. That's why it's stupid. That's why I googled it. If a monster of yours is sent from the field to the graveyard during the turn that you've played this card, you can select the monster with an attack of 15 or less from deck and play it as a special summon. Shuffle the deck after playing the card. This card is active for 1 turn only. I mean, the original English TCG text ruling is really clunky and stupid. But it kind of makes sense. As a special summon. Yes. Is this the original card text? Translate.
Instead of a monster sent to the base this turn, you can put a monster with an attack power of 1500 or less from your deck onto the field. S. Gekaryoku.
Yep. S. Gekaryoku. Oh, is this supposed to say special summon? Maybe that's supposed to say special summon. That's really funny.
Limit to the number of times you could use this effect in the turn. So if the monster you summoned was then sent to the graveyard, you could use Last Will's effect on that monster too. What players did was activate Last Will with Critter or Witch of the Black Forest. Critter or Witch would deliberately attack an opponent's attack mode monster to get themselves destroyed by battle, causing their effect to send an Exodia piece to hand, after which Last Will would summon another Critter or Witch from the deck, which would then attack to get itself destroyed to add another piece to hand, and the cycle would repeat infinitely until the player had assembled all 5 pieces and instantly won.
Why is Exodia tier 0 in OCG?
Monster was dangerous during this format, because as soon as your turn ended, your opponent could loop their way into all of the Exodia parts without you having any chance to respond. Good Stuff decks could no longer function because putting Gemini Elf or Lejin on the table was suicide. So they were reliant entirely on
no,
Metamorphot
you've summoned
and
an
God's Judgment
1800
to get
monster,
by,
you idiot.
and thus Good Stuff vanished overnight. Last Will also created another infinite loop with Cannon Soldier, because you could tribute a monster for Cannon Soldier's effect and then use
Wait, this
Last
guy
Will
did
to
more than
special
one
summon
FTK?
another monster from your deck to tribute with Cannon Soldier, either repeating this to burn the opponent down to 0 life points, or using it with the aforementioned Critter and Witch to loop your way into a full Exodia. Burning the opponent from 8k to 0 was impressive, but a far less popular strategy because you had to go through 16 monsters to do it. But using it to initiate the Exodia loop independent of the opponent made Cannon Soldier game-shatteringly powerful. With Good Stuff gone,
what?
Yu-Gi-Oh!
So you wouldn't even use Cannon Soldier
format,
as
where
like an
neither
FTK?
player
You would just
actually
add
interacted
Exodia
with
pieces?
their opponent's plays, but instead memorized card combos and tried to get their Exodia pieces as fast as possible, potentially on their second turn using a Cannon Soldier Critter
This is the
loop.
dumbest thing ever.
Under the right conditions, first turn kills were also not unheard of, with the player going second being completely unable to take any turns before losing. The November 1999 OCG format would go on to become one of the most reviled in the game's long life, but it was not an isolated incident. Similar one-turn or first-turn kill decks would continue to arise on an annual or biannual basis every year until 2007. These were not cracks showing in the game's balance. They were the building blocks of the game itself crashing down around it. In the following months, Exodia decks gradually phased out Swords of Revealing Light entirely, instead building towards the Exodia mirror match. The speed at which Exodia could win the game was so fast that the game had degenerated into a one-deck format, widely criticized as just being rock, paper, scissors with extra steps. Whoever went first won. A lot of players were quitting, leaving for the slower Neo block of the Pokemon TCG, Golden Tree era Monster Collection, or the brand new Digimon card game and its Play What You Want format. This issue would...
Dude, it's like, you'd think, like, after 20 years of experience with a card game meta, that they would understand, like, the concept of game design and stuff, right? And, like their cards that they're printing, like, they need to recognize, like, they have a problem when they do this stuff. And how is it that they, like, still, like, year after year, keep making these same mistakes? Since 1998, Cannon Soldier has been a problem, and somehow, like, it reappears in the meta. Like, how?
persist throughout the first weeks of the new year. Volume 7 launched on January 27, 2000, and contained many powerful cards befitting an end-of-block set, like Thunder Dragon, an effect monster capable of discarding itself to tutor two more
wait till you
Thunder
hear about
Dragons
this
from
guy's
deck to
original
hand,
errata.
and Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon, a fusion monster made by fusing two Thunder Dragons together. Since the fusion materials for a fusion summon didn't need to be on the field to fuse, players really only needed a fusion magic card and a single Thunder Dragon. That Thunder Dragon would tutor the other two to hand to make the fusion summon immediately, both reducing the number of cards that needed to be assembled in combination and slightly offsetting the normal loss in card advantage from expending 3 cards to summon 1. This set also marked the debut of the Holy Barrier Mirror Force, a trap card derived from
Holy
the manga that destroyed
Barrier?
all of the opponent's monsters
Wait, no, that's just him like using a metaphor, right? It's not actually what it's called, is it?
when they attacked with even one of them. Other powerful monsters included Dark Elf, a 4-star monster with 2,000 attack that required
Is it called
1,000
Holy
life point
Barrier?
cost to declare its attacks,
Okay.
and different dimension
I gotta say, chat, this is like probably the first time in like this entire like 2-part episode of this YouTube video where I felt like the TCG name was better. Like, Mirror Force is way cooler.
Warrior, the first card in Yu-Gi-Oh! To remove other cards from the game. DD Warrior's effect removed both it and the monster it battled from play after damage calculation, making it capable of removing monsters stronger than itself from the board at the cost of also disappearing. In theory, this would have stopped Critter
It's
and Witch
Holy
of the
Barrier
Black
Mirror
Forest
Force.
effects from
Wait, really?
resolving, since they wouldn't be
Oh,
sent
what
to
the
the
hell?
graveyard by battle.
Mirafos.
But in practice, it was more common at the time to resolve them by discarding them for graceful charity. In fact, most of the cards I just described were not played at all upon release, because the game revolved so heavily around Exodia that battle was uncommon. Konami's
you're trying to
answer
battle
all
your
of these
opponent for,
problems
dude.
was
That's cringe.
already in the works. 3 months after the EX starter box launched, they finally put an end to the madness with the February 2000 ban list, limiting Last Will, Pot of Greed, Change of Heart, Mirror Force, and every Exodia piece to 1 copy per
Why
deck.
did they need to limit Mirror
Semi-limiting
Force if no
Graceful
one's
Charity,
battling?
Harpy's Feather Duster, and Monster Reborn
How do they look at a card like Graceful and be like, yeah, sure, this card? Yeah, no, let's put it to 2. Like, bruh, just ban it. Like, how did they think, like, oh yeah, 2's reasonable for this card? Fucking limit it, dude.
to 2 copies per deck, and taking Pitfall off the list entirely.
Yo, Pitfall!
Hitting Last Will, Pot of Greed, and Graceful Charity were the most impactful changes, and helped push Exodia out of the format as a serious competitive deck. At the same time, they issued their first errata, changing the official text of Critter and Witch of the Black Forest so that their effects only resolved when they were sent from the field to the graveyard.
Oh, no,
These
that's
cards could no
crazy.
longer be comboed with Graceful Charity, and with Exodia gone, Good Stuff made an overnight return as the competitive darling, primarily in the form of Demon Beat Devil Franken decks. Despite Pitfall leaving the list,
Franken
the card
decks.
itself was now rarely played as a result of Mirror Force and other counters replacing it. 7 months of power creep had rendered it suboptimal. Booster 7 launched in March 2000, and while it was primarily made up of reprints from Volume 7, it did introduce 2 new cards. Dream Pierrot, localized as Dream Clown in the
Yo, was
English
Clown
game, was
Control
an effect
serious?
monster that destroyed an opponent's monster every time it changed from attack mode to face-up defense mode. This required you to summon Dream Pierrot in a vulnerable state first and protect it for a turn with Waboku, Swords of Revealing Light, or another defensive measure, but in exchange could remove a card from the opponent's board every other turn after that, since each monster's position could only be adjusted once per turn. This was useful for taking care of set monsters before their flip effects could be used, taking the lead in card advantage and maintaining control over the game. Because of Pierrot's general slowness, the card wasn't especially useful to run multiple copies of, so it was more common to run a single copy of it, what's often called a tech in TCG parlance, and tutor that tech with Critter or Witch when
tech.
tributing them for Summoned Demon. The other big card from this set was Heavy Storm, a magic card that did to the Magic Trap Zone what Black Hole did to Monster Zones, destroying
yeah, baby.
all magic and trap cards in play. While this was a strictly worse version of Harpy's Feather Duster, the two coexisted in this format, both because of the difficulty of acquiring Duster and because of how it could functionally work as additional copies of Duster in many situations. What this set really marked was the end of the first block of OCG cards, what later became known as Series 1. A lot of people expected an apocalypse in 1999.
All right, chat, let's go. Series 1 OCG tournament. Let's fucking go.
But when the turn of the millennium came, there were no end times waiting for the world. Nostradamus' prophecy about the great
Even the OCG shitty 2000 Exodia format sounds more fun than what we had.
King of Terror was averted. The Y2K bug had been contained by collective efforts spanning the entire globe, and with no world war or rapture coming anytime soon, everybody was left to figure out what to do with themselves.
Oh, does anyone remember that?
They had already
Oh, I remember this exact scene.
Collective efforts
that was so
spanning
cringe.
the entire globe, and with
Look
no
how uncomfortable
world
she
war
looks.
or rapture coming anytime soon, everybody was left to figure out what to do with themselves. For Konami, they had already laid the groundwork for a soft reboot of the OCG, Series 2, and a new ban list that would allow them to squeeze their existing player base for more cash, while bringing in a new wave of customers that would be on
Dude, look
more
at
or
these
less
card names.
even.
These set names, rather. Thousand Eyes Bible. Magic Ruler. Oh, that's original. Spell of Mask. Booster Chronicle. I love this Thousand Eye Bible.
Footing with veterans. This next block would focus on a mix of reprints with a new standardized card layout, wordings, and icons, and new cards to shape the direction of the game's future, and it would coincide with the premiere of Studio Gallup's Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime, a weekly anime series adapting the Duelist Kingdom arc of the manga, with actual OCG cards digitally inserted to promote the game. This was a level of advertising no card game before had ever tried, and it was obvious it was going to succeed. So obvious, in fact, that outside of Japan, it was actually illegal. With Konami planning to expand their business into the English-speaking world, they began looking for both a licensee for the card game and for the anime series. To comply with the United States' post-He-Man regulations on advertising in children's television, these digitally inserted cards would need to be edited to ensure they did not actually resemble any real product Konami was selling. But editing anime for international circulation was by this time a trivial expense.
What an absolute pointless law. Oh, you need to change the card so it doesn't look like an actual real product as a way of advertising. What do you mean, bro? Everyone knows that when you go to the store and you buy Yu-Gi-Oh cards, it's the ones from the anime.
The future was bright for Konami. After all, how bad could they possibly be?
Yeah. Who knows, dude? Who knows? Why am I not subscribed, dude? Alright, part 12 soon, chat? Part 12 soon? If he does a part 12, I don't know. Well, that was epic, dude. It's that was one of the greatest series of videos I've ever watched on YouTube. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed that. That was incredible. Maniac's channel, chat. You guys should go all subscribe to him. Yep, that was fucking amazing. All right, chat. As promised today, as promised, you guys have been waiting for it. You know what's coming up next. A little bit behind schedule, but that's okay. Chat, we have the traditional format, round 2, feature matches. Meaning that the competitors are going to be a little bit more competitive than that. So what I'm going to do is, because I have a video currently available on YouTube that I'm now going to ask you all to chat. Where do we put this video? It's ready to go. I'm going to upload it now because I guess it's a good way for people to just watch my content, maybe join my stream if they really want. Chat, this video is going where? The moon. Check out, watch my video. Click it, watch it, pause the stream if you need to or whatever. What we're going to do here, chat, I'm going to quickly have a little 90-second poo-poo break. Come back, and then we're going to do round 2 feature matches of traditional. Okay, chat, don't go anywhere. We're here, we're live, we got feature matches to come, and then after that, we got the North American Remote Duel Invitational Top Cut. So we've got a lot of shit to do, boys. All right, BRB, don't go anywhere, chat, and enjoy the time being.